Well, thanks for joining us. Nice to have you this morning. Edward Rogers is getting his way at Rogers Communications. Joe Natale has been ousted as CEO. His interim replacement is Tony Staffieri, the former CFO at Rogers, whose abrupt exit in late September was the first public signal of the power struggle at Canada's largest wireless telecom operator. The CEO switch is exactly what Mr. Rogers wanted, as recent court documents revealed the timeline of his plot to push out Natale. And it comes less than a week before Rogers faces the CRTC for its approval of its $20 billion takeover of Shaw Communications. So a lot to continue watching for. And someone who's been helping us as we've navigated through this story over the last few weeks is Richard Leblanc. He's a professor of governance, law, and ethics at York University, and he joins us again this morning. Richard, thanks for being with us. Always nice to have you.
Good to be here, John. Thank you.
And I suppose for some people who are really closely watching this story, it might not be a surprise that we have now officially seen a CEO switch. What's your reaction?
Well, I agree. It's not a surprise. This is part of Edward Rogers' playbook, is you replace directors, and then step two is to replace the CEO. And I think having an interim CEO who is internal, the former CFO, is good, and it brings stability while the board can begin a search for a permanent CEO.
What does that process look like in your estimation? I mean, you've been involved in advising a lot of companies over CEO searches. This seems like it has been a highly unusual situation in corporate Canada from the start. But walk us through what it means for Tony Staffieri to be returning after essentially being ousted from the previous board. Closely aligned with Edward Rogers, but with the interim CEO title for now, and this possibility that somebody else may come in at some point?
Yeah, normally a board would do an internal and external search. If they go external, and I think they probably will here, they will retain a recruitment firm, a global recruitment firm. I wouldn't be surprised if the search is a global search. And Mr. Staffieri has a bit of an advantage because he's interim, but he's also a candidate for the permanent position. Normally, an interim CEO is someone who can keep the lights on for 6 or 7 months, but does not want the permanent position. So he's got a bit of an advantage. But the issue here is that the Rogers board is dysfunctional, and family members continue to be at each other's throats, and that will no doubt affect the talent pipeline of external candidates that are willing to come forward, because a dysfunctional board is kryptonite to a prospective external CEO.
I just want to expand on that a little bit, because you might have thought things were getting a little bit quiet for a period of time. You know, anyone who wants to speculate perhaps could have speculated that perhaps there were some family conversations. Maybe they were going to put some of the bad blood behind them. But again, speaking to the unusual nature of this corporate feud and family feud, that you would have the statement come out last night from Rogers with the announcement of the new CEO and Joe Natale departing, and then a statement from Edward Rogers' mother and sisters essentially reiterating some of their past positions, that Joe Natale was doing a pretty good job, and we're disappointed by what's going on here. What was your reaction to that?
Well, that's anomalous for any public company director to come out publicly against a board decision and undermine that decision. It signals to me that that's not public company director behavior. If that had occurred at any other public company, I'm confident that the directors would receive a letter of reprimand from the board chair. The problem here is you have deep rifts among family members. And this goes back to, family members and insiders being on the board of Rogers. As near as I can tell, John, this has always been a dispute between 3 family members and a 4th family member. And I think that is what is driving all of this. And I think, and I've said publicly, that the sooner you can orient towards consensus, the better. And that I mistakenly thought after a week of non-activity that there was people would put their swords down and they'd rally behind the new board, but that has not been the case.
Well, and I just want to stay on that point for a little bit, just because there are a lot of statements that have come out from Rogers, from Edward Rogers, that point to, essentially, and quite frankly, some of this is also the reporting that's out there, but basically the idea that performance is at the center of this, that this has been a measurement of Joe Natale's performance. Do you think that is the case? Is this ultimately a story about performance, or it sounded like you were alluding to the fact that perhaps this is just a lot more about power?
I I think this is performance driven. And
Okay.
I think that the three family members might think it's driven by power. In fact, the statement last night would allude to that. But I see Edward Rogers as an activist. He just happens to be an inside activist. And the fact is that Rogers has been underperforming its peers. And the number one decision of any board is to replace the CEO. And directors tell me, John, that their regret, not these directors, but directors generally, is I didn't replace the CEO sooner. So sometimes CEOs can be underperforming, and it takes a while for the board to get the courage to do that. And the nice thing here about Edward Rogers is he has the courage, and he's acting efficiently and effectively. So I believe that this is part of an activist playbook, and I also advise activists. This is all about performance, and he's also exhibited conciliatory behavior of a public company chair in orienting towards consensus. So I give him full credit.
I do understand the activist analogy, but at the end of the day, is Edward Rogers not an insider here? You look at the new board members that have come on. We could have a whole conversation around how those people were selected for what you might describe as a diverse board. And then at the end of the day, is this a case of activism if Tony Staffieri, who has been at the company for many years, ends up becoming the permanent CEO? Is this a good case study for shareholder activism or someone really trying to shake things up?
It is and it isn't. The analogy is not perfect, but the fact of the matter is that Rogers is not effectively governed, and they hang their hat on, including the family members in the company, that they are effectively governed. They're not. They effectively govern means you have an independent chair, which Edward Rogers is not. You have fully independent committees, and you don't have excessive family members and insiders on the board. So this is activism within a poorly governed environment. So the analogy is not perfect, but the corporate governance flaws here are coming to roost because you have a family firm with dual class shares and a voting trust that's ineffectively governed. So I think it's time for Canadian regulatory authorities to revisit our governance guidelines to prevent something like this from happening again. Just one last one for you this morning. We made a reference to the fact that all eyes are on what happens with the Shaw deal right now. And in all the reporting that surfaced on this story, there were versions of reporting that highlighted not just that Edward Rogers wanted to replace Joe Natale, but that there was a desire to make some big management changes with senior executives. You've got a lot of executives that, were brought in by Joe Natale. Not much has been said by the company on that front right now. How important do you think it will be for the company to disclose the plans going forward with the senior management, especially in the face of this, what feels like a united front from Rogers to get to the finish line on the Shaw deal? Well, I think the CRTC has to act in the public interest, and they will want full disclosure of any significant management changes. And you're quite correct that we might see more fallout from some senior managers that have loyalty to the former CEO, Mr. Natale, and they may resign as well. So there are more shoes to drop next week with the regulator and governance concerns and leadership sustainability, which no doubt will come into play.